Okay, good evening. So for tonight's Halacha slot, we always try and pick a topic connected to this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha has four, not one, not two, not three, but four chasnas, four weddings. And therefore I thought I'd talk about the topic of fasting on the wedding day. It's a very interesting topic. Why do we fast? It seems to be the accepted practice in the whole of Klal Yisrael that you fast on the day of the wedding, the day of the chuppah. Why do we do this? And then are there different practices, different minhagim, and are there exceptions? Does everyone have to fast? What is the status of it? So let's take a look. Take a look at the second box. These are the first two reasons given. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. The Levush gives the first two reasons. We'll see there are a total of 6 reasons that I've come across, and it's really based on an article I saw in Rav Kaganov has put all of this together, and I've extracted most of the information from that. The Levush says, "Nagu shehachosen v'hakala misanin b'yom chupason." The minhag is that a chosen and kala fast on the day of their wedding. V'taimer kadesh yochlu v'yishtu v'yishtakru v'yom kiddush toisein. First reason is that people, the chosen and kala, might drink, they might become intoxicated, and therefore that could invalidate the actual wedding. If they're not quite sure what they're doing, maybe they're nervous, they had a l'chaim beforehand, especially at the chosen's tish beforehand, other people might be partaking of a l'chaim, so therefore that is the concern. That is one reason, therefore, to avoid being drunk and invalidating the kiddushin. The second reason, the Levush says, Inami mishum shehu lohem yom mechilas chato'am. This is a day where the sins are forgiven. K'mo b'yom kippur. It's their mini Yom Kippur. The day of a chuppah is like the mini Yom Kippur for the chosen and for the kala. K'moshe amarnu b'medrash, like the medrash says, and it's quoting the Yerushalmi, which we'll do in a second. And the truth is there are two makars. There's one in the Bavli, one in Yerushalmi. The Gemara in Yevamah Samach Gimel Beis in the Bavli says, "Kivan shenasa adam isha, when a man and a woman get married, avonosav mispakakin." Mispakakin means their sins crumble. In other words, it's sort of, they get atonement for anything they may have done wrong, and it brings a pasuk, Matzah Isha, Matzah Tov, etc. Now, it's important to note that it may be a personal Yom Kippur, but just like Yom Kippur, there are two types of Averas. There's Ben Odom L'Mokum and Ben Odom L'Chaveru. So Ben Odom L'Mokum, Yom Kippur can annul that, can wipe away that Avera, but it needs tshuva. What's the tshuva? Well, there are 3 elements to tshuva. Number one, you've got to be mischaret, you've got to have charota, you've got to have regret over things that you may have done wrong. This is again, bein odom l'mokum. Bein odom l'mokum, for example, Shabbos. For example, eating things which are not kosher. So that's bein odom l'mokum. So number one, you need charota, regret. Number 2, you need vidui, to actually confess, to articulate it. And number 3, it's a kabbalah la'osid, an undertaking to not do it again. So once you've done those 3, genuine, then a person's slate is wiped clean. So that's true in Yom Kippur. Bein odom l'chaveru, I guess if a person stole money from someone or upset somebody, you've got to ask mechila, just like on Yom Kippur. But the Gemara says that the day a person gets married, it's like a mini Yom Kippur for them. And in fact, the Yerushalmi says there are other people as well. Chacham, chosen, nosi, oile l'gdula, a person is given a position of prominence. Then also avonosav mechulin. And it brings a pasuk of Esav. He marries, recently in the Parsha, he marries Ishmael. V'yikach mochlas bas Ishmael, as the Gemara says in Yerushalmi there, v'chi mochlas Shmael, v'halubos mas Shmael, ele shenimchu l'loi kol avonosav. It's a hint to the fact that when a person gets married, their averas are wiped out. Now, it's important for a person to realize that the Yom Kippur, that the day of their chasna, is like a mini Yom Kippur, and tefillah is very powerful. Just like on Yom Kippur, we do tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah. Tshuva we've spoken about. At tzedakah, there's an Indian to give tzedakah. I remember Rabbi Aaron always, collects v'achnosas kala from the chosen and kala themselves on the day of their chasna to give a little bit of tzedakah. And also tefillah. Tefillah is very powerful. In fact, the mincha before the chuppah for the chosen and kala is the same as the mincha of Erev Yom Kippur. Right, so that's why, and I always, I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to teach Chassanim quite a lot, and I would tell them that you need to plan the day, but make sure you give a big chunk of time for mincha. It's one of the most important minchas they're going to daven in their whole life. And therefore, I sit down with the chassan, and often he hasn't thought it all through. Say the chuppah is going to be at 4 o'clock, so the tish is called for 3:15. And there may be even davening mincha at Tish, 3:30 or 3:15 mincha, followed by the Tish. And I remember Dayan Lapin Zatzal used to tell me, tell the chasanim, better they daven b'yechidus, with kavana, than davening at the Tish with everyone else. When everyone's focusing on them, they'll be all distracted, they won't daven b'kavana. It's such an important mincha, better they daven b'yechidus, which is astonishing really. And therefore work it out. And therefore if you've got to get ready and you've got to get to the hall, and what time is the earliest time you can daven mincha, and these are all conversations which Chassan and Kala need to have. So they have to daven. What do they daven for? So the Beis Shmuel says, Noagu shachosn ha'kala misanin, says the Aruch HaShulchan in the penultimate box on the first page, Kama minhagim yofim hinhigu b'nei Yisrael. There are many, many minhagim that Klal Yisrael do be'ez chasunosam. Hinhigu lisanus b'yom hachuppah. They have the minhag to fast. V'kiven sheyom slicha meharoyu lisanus levakish rachamim. They should daven. The Chosn and Kala themselves should daven. Sheyichye chaye shalva. They should have a serene, pleasant life in bas zugay with their spouse. They should be blessed with a family, etc., etc. So that's really important. In Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan's Sefer on the Jewish marriage, he makes this point. It's very important. The chasanim and kalas under the chuppah, they're davening for lots of things, and people give them names and who knows what. But actually, charity begins at home, and the first tefillah is for themselves. They should have a happy, successful marriage. When the kala goes round 7 times, it's brought that there's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The Echad is one HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the 7 worlds above us, the 7 heavens, and in this world. That's the Ches, and Daled in all 4 corners of it. And there's a total unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In this world and the 7 heavens above us, that's the Ches, 8. Every time she goes round, she's opening one of the gates, as it were, to Shemaim. By the time she's stopped going round 7 times, you've got a direct line. And the key, the ikka tefillah that a chas and kala should daven under their chuppah is they should be blessed with a happy, successful marriage. So it's a day of slicha and mechila, and also of opportunity to be mevakish rachamim. Now, so therefore, so far 2 reasons. Number 1, to avoid being drunk and possibly invalidating the kiddushin, and number 2 is like a mini Yom Kippur to achieve some sort of atonement. Now, the nafkaminas between these 2 reasons are very interesting. How long do we actually have to fast for? You see, imagine a winter day. Now, this Motzei Shabbos goes out, I don't know exactly, about 5 o'clock. Or last week, about 5 o'clock. So imagine you have the chuppah at 3 o'clock. So have you got to finish, with the Chosn and Kala, they've got to fast till 5 o'clock or till the chuppah at 3 o'clock? So if the reason is because you might get drunk, so then 3 o'clock you're okay. After the chuppah you're good to go. Eat and drink. If the reason is the day of mechil and slich and kapara, then maybe not.
Except for the fact they drink under the chuppah.
Okay, yeah, true. By the way, I remember, who was it? Someone told me, maybe Rabbi Hartman. He says he's only seen this once in his life. Normally they drink a sip, right? And therefore Chosn drank, and the first thing he did after the chuppah, normally everyone starts dancing and singing and clapping. The first thing he did, he sat down and he made an ala gefen, because he drank shit. I've never ever seen that. Now, probably because 95% of chasanim, they don't drink enough to make an ala gefen. Anyway, so how long do we fast for? So the Chachmas Adam and the Aruch HaShulchan talk about this, and the Chachmas Adam I've quoted there. You can end the fast at dark, and just be careful not to drink. So, for example, let's say the chuppah. There was a chasna a couple of days ago. The chuppah was called for 6 o'clock. So nacht will be 5 o'clock. So he would say, well, actually, you can break your tanis at 5 o'clock, and just don't have a cup of tea rather than a glass of whiskey, right? So make sure you just don't drink before the fast.
You mean drink alcohol?
Yeah, exactly. Don't drink alcohol. And the Aruch HaShulchan says you should fast until the chuppah. Either way, the accepted practice is to blinim, because it can be the other way around as well. You can have it in the summer, and it can be the other way around. So either way. Now, so that's 2 reasons. A third reason is the Tashbetz says it commemorates Matan Torah. If you look at in the Tashbetz, he says, "Kamoshes anu bo Yisrael, kamokein hachosn misana of Matan Torah Yunus Nosim," and in Nisuin, it's like Matan Torah was like a wedding. And therefore, just like a Chosn and Kala, just like the Klal Yisrael fasted at Matan Torah, also too, we Chosn and Kala would fast at their wedding. So it's to commemorate Matan Torah. That's the third reason. The fourth and fifth reason is brought in the Shad and Shuz Mahari Brunner, the top of the next page. He says, interesting, Uviyan Kusi. He says, when I was a young man, Omarti hatam she'achosen misanim mishum domrinan the melech nidoin b'chol yom, that a king is judged daily. V'chosen doim melech. And just like a chosen is compared to a king, and a king is judged every day, therefore it's his judged daily, and therefore his misanim, like his mini Yom Kippur, is being judged that day. So he fasts. That's the fourth reason. The fifth reason is fascinating. He says, "V'oid amarti b'mei churfi." I also said when I was a youngster, he says, "Hatam de'omru leka ksuba delei romi botigra." Very interesting and important Gemara to remember. The Gemara Shabbos Daf Kuf Lamed Amud says, "There is no wedding without some argument." That is just the nature of the wedding. Now, sometimes the arguments are major, right? And sometimes, hopefully, it's very minor. So I was at a simcha last Shabbos. So on Friday night, the Baalei Simcha were a bit, they were making a mitzvah, and it was a Friday night Suda. So they were a bit upset because the caterers they forgot to bring the wine. So I said to the father of the mitzvah boy, a friend of mine, I said, listen, the Gemara says, Leka ksuba b'le tigra. There's no wedding without some sort of upset, some sort of anxiety. I said to him, let this be your only upset. Yeah, there's no wine. Yeah, there'll be other things. There'll be a beautiful simcha, and you have nachas from your son, and there'll be lots of. This is a kiyum of that. There'll be nothing worse than that, right? That's the way to look at it. Imkach. So too to avoid. Let's carry on. Imkain kach nigzer beis gezerah denefil beipronis. There seems to be a gezerah. There'll be some sort of upset, damage, danger, machlokas. Lefichach misanel levat lapronis. One of the reasons we fast is to avert any danger or machlokas. Fine, and therefore he gives exceptions to this rule. And the last and the sixth reason is the Rokeach says it's in great anticipation of performing a rare mitzvah. One doesn't get married, hopefully once in their life, and therefore in anticipation, just like he says, Kederach she'osin chasidim rishonim, that in anticipation of a great mitzvah, therefore one fasts for that reason. So therefore, so far 6 reasons why we fast on the day of the chuppah: to avoid being drunk and invalidating the kiddushin, to achieve some sort of atonement in this day of tefillah, particularly under the chuppah, particularly by the chos and kala themselves, a commemoration of Matan Torah where they fasted. The king is chos and doma lemelech. The famous vart of the Sasser Rebbe. How long does this last for? Right, the famous vart. I remember, I think I once said it here, that my father-in-law once saw a fellow walk down Golker's Green Road Shabbos morning. It was a bit late. He was going to shul Shabbos morning a bit late, so the guy was a bit sheepish, and he said, and then he was sort of walking toward. And my father said, it's Shana Rishona. Yeah, it will turn a blind eye. So the guy said, yeah, I've been married 1.5 years. So my father said to him, he goes, yeah, in Chutz La'aretz we keep 2 years. So how long does it last? How long is the king and king? So the Sasser Rebbe used to say that, he's a melech as long as he treats his color as the malka. That's a famous line, right? So he's a melech, so therefore, just like a melech is nidden b'chol yom, so too a chosen is nidden, his judge, and therefore it's like a mini Yom Kippur, and therefore he fasts. And the sixth reason, anticipation of performing a rare mitzvah. Now, a couple of final points. Number one, Sfardim, the minhag is not to fast. The Yabia Omer, the great Rabbi Yosef, here in the middle box in paragraph 3, I've quoted it here. There isn't time to go through it, but he says quite clearly the minhag is not to fast, and he brings various locations. And then he says, he said, let them eat and drink on the day of the chuppah. He says, it's a yontov. It's not a sad day, and therefore they should eat and drink. They don't need to do they should eat and drink. And someone who wants to be machmir and to be strict upon themselves and to fast, they're not doing the correct thing, says Ravadia. Ashkenazim, if that's their minhag, if that's what they want to do, Peseda, but not for us Sfardim. So the Sfardim have the minhag not to fast. 2 more points. Number one, Anenu. Anenu is we add into Shemona Esrei on the day when we fast, and a chosn and kala, if they're fasting on the day of their chuppah, they should add in Anenu. That's brought in Shulchan Aruch in Erchaim in Hilchas Tanis Siman Tov Kuf Samach Beis. Hayochid mispal Anenu v'chein chosn yispal Anenu kodim sheikonis lechuppah. Which a lot of chasanim forget about that, but you can add in Anenu if a person is fasting. Okay, and days when you don't fast. Well, first of all, there are lots of days when you don't fast. Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Tu B'Shvat, Tu B'Av, Isru Chag, etc. All these days you don't fast. So some chasanim, they try and schedule, their wedding in a day that they can avoid that. But the key heter is if a person is not feeling well. And the rationale is quite straightforward. Even on Tanis Esther, which is the least stringent fast, someone suffering from a minor ailment is not required to fast. Well, certainly not here, whether it's a minhag not to fast on the day of the chuppah, and it's less of an obligation, so certainly you shouldn't fast. And the Aruch HaShulchan, he brings that. He says, "Im kosha aleim hatanis ma'od lo yisanu." If it's going to be very difficult for them to fast, they don't feel well, lo yisanu. I remember one time I was teaching a chassan, and he was a member of the Dayan Shul, Dayan Shul, and the Dayan told him very categorically, do not fast. He was worried this guy was of a sort of a weaker constitution, and he'd be swaying under the chuppah and fainting and who knows what. And he says, it's a minhag, and if you're not feeling well, you do not fast, which is exactly what the Aruch HaShulchan is saying. So there we have it, an interesting connection to this week's parsha. 4 chasanas take place in this week's parsha, and as the pasuk says, that Lavan made a mishteh, a wedding feast, and it's a good opportunity to talk about these 6 reasons why we fast on the day of the chasna, and the various associated minhagim and pturim when not to fast.